Welcome back, everybody, to episode 25 of the Back Lounge podcast. My name is Tank. I'm your host, and I'm a roadie with over 16 years of experience in the touring music industry. And on this podcast, we just invite on other people from the music industry and talk about whatever. And for this latest episode, I had the absolute pleasure of bringing on a couple people that I absolutely love in the music industry, and each of them have been on the channel, the YouTube channel, rather separately in the past, but because they're working on a project together now, I decided to get them both at the same time. So today we are going to be talking to Hans Platz and Melissa Bonny of The Dark Side of the Moon. Now, most of you listening might also know their other bands, Hans, the guitar player for the German band Feuerschwanz, and Melissa, the vocalist most notably from Ad Infinitum, but she's been a part of other projects as well, even just finished touring with Camelot. Like, both of these people are doing so much with their respective bands that I don't know how they have the time to do everything. And in this episode, I actually talked to them about it, and it was really cool, man. And this just goes along with what I've always talked about with European bands and musicians always working together. Like, you see that a ton with the European music scene, and it's really cool because we get a lot of cool projects about it. Now, The Dark Side of the Moon just released their first full-length studio album on May 12th. It's called Metamorphosis. Honestly, I was blown away by it. I expected to enjoy it, but I was really kind of stunned when I listened to it from start to finish, but by how good it actually was. So if you haven't heard that album yet from start to finish, definitely go check that out. There's a mix of their own renditions of popular movie and video game music, but they also have original songs on it too, so it's really cool. And then Hans with Feuerschwanz, I mean, they've been nonstop busy, touring a ton. They've even announced tour dates for next year, 2024 already. They've got Ordenogan and Angus McSix's support on that, so that's going to be really cool. And Feuerschwanz also has a brand new album coming out on July 7th, 2023. It's going to be called Fegefeuer, and we have had some singles and releases from that already, so that's super cool. And then Melissa's other band, Ad Infinitum, released one of their brand new studio albums, their third album actually, called Chapter 3 Downfall. That came out back in March, if I'm not mistaken. And if you're listening to the podcast on headphones, you can probably hear my dogs barking in the background right now. So just kind of how this stuff goes sometimes. But I want to get into this one for you guys because we had a great conversation. It's a little over an hour long for those of you that are doing things and wondering about time. But before we start that, this is just a good point to remind everybody that this podcast is available on multiple formats. You can watch the video versions on YouTube. You can also listen to just the audio on Spotify, Apple Music, Google, and anywhere else that you like to listen to podcasts. And if you'd like to support my channel or this podcast or anything, you could check out merchandise, TankTheTechmerch.com. There's some designs on there. I'm in the process of moving things over to another merchandise supplier and working on some new stuff, so be on the lookout for that. You could also sign up for Patreon if you would like to. Patreon.com/TankTheTech. We've got a couple tiers with a couple bonus perks that you can get, like seeing the podcast and the videos early before they're released, as well as having access to a private Discord channel and stuff like that. But just know that that stuff is not necessary. I do appreciate if you do it, though. It does help the channel out, but mostly I just appreciate you guys taking the time to watch and listen to these episodes and my content. But now that that's all out of the way, let's just get into this one. Let's kick off episode 25 of the Back Lounge podcast. Coming back to the channel again, I think first time on the podcast, though. Welcome, Melissa Bonny and Hans Platz. How are you guys?
Great.
Good.
Great and tired.
Tired, yeah.
I can only imagine. And that was the one thing about this podcast that I thought was going to be interesting, is because you two and all your bandmates and the bands you're in with are some of the busiest people that I see. Like, I probably don't even know everything that you guys are doing because you're just so non-stop. I mean, have you guys been able to get some rest since you've been home at all?
Not really. I mean,
No.
Morten and I arrived home yesterday evening, so
Yesterday?
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And Hans, you arrived yesterday morning as well, right?
Yesterday morning, yeah. We had a tour bus, so we were driving through the night and arrived yesterday morning. But you know, those tour buses, you don't really sleep that deep because it's constantly shaking and vibrating and snoring.
You don't sleep well on a bus?
Well, sooner or later you sleep deep
Yeah.
because you're so tired that eventually you will sleep.
Yeah.
But it needs some adjustment, I think. And I wake up every now and then, depending on the driver. Actually, we replaced the driver during the tour because the first driver thought he has to be at the goal and at the city as fast as possible instead of driving very slow to let us sleep. So yeah. So
yeah. We've had situations like that too, especially with we had one bus driver that we had to replace once that just he always had a habit of hitting the rumble strips on the shoulder of the road to the point where we started calling him Rumble Stiltskin.
Yeah, right.
He eventually got replaced, but I've always slept decent on a bus. But now I'm curious that I've been home for so long that once I do go back out on tour like hard this summer, I wonder how I'm going to sleep. But I had no idea you guys had just gotten home that quick, because when all these things are set up, it's just like, oh yeah, they have time now. I assumed you've been home for a bit. So thank you even more for being here.
Sure.
Of course.
But there's so much to get through with this, because I want to talk about everything you guys have been working on, but let's talk about the big main thing first. The Dark Side of the Moon album, Metamorphosis, finally came out on Friday, May 12th, because this podcast will come out later. And it is phenomenal. Like, I'm going to be honest with you guys. When it came out, I knew I was going to sit and listen to it. I knew I was going to like it because I like you guys and I liked what I've heard, but I did not expect that record to blow me away that hard. It's fantastic from start to finish.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
I mean, even just the choices of the track listing, like, is just a perfect flow from start to finish. And I had moments where I was sitting here listening to it where I couldn't help but just kind of like smile a bit at certain parts, because the mixing on it was fantastic. Of course it would be, because Jacob Hansen did everything, correct? Yeah. So, but God, it was just awesome. And now that it's out, I just really want to know, like, because you guys put a lot of time into it, how are you guys feeling with it? Are you happy with the release?
Yes, absolutely. We are super happy. The reactions so far have been really overwhelming. All the reviews and what people are writing, and it's such a long time to do such an album, and then it's out, and it's so exciting to see the reactions of everybody, the YouTube comments, the Facebook comments, everything, and we read it. And yeah, it's fantastic, and we are very proud of it, actually. Yeah,
I think it was especially heartwarming to see people singing lyrics in the audience for our first 4 shows. It was like, I remember during the first show being like, what, people are really singing the lyrics already? And it's just crazy to see how much support we're getting from everyone and the response. It's just like Hans said.
Yeah, and it's for people that didn't know, I mean, your first show as a band with the Dark Side of the Moon was it the 11th, right before the record release?
Yeah.
And it was with Feuerschwanz, correct?
Yes.
So and on 2 different levels, like, I want to know more about that show, because you guys have your own bands and other projects and stuff, so you're no strangers to the stage. But for each of you, did you have a little bit of nervousness to do that first show?
God.
Really?
Yeah.
Not just a little bit. Really, the closer it came, the more my stomach started to growl. The whole week before, I was got super excited and anxious about it.
Yeah.
But and there's so much preparation which you don't see. Getting all the technical guys on board to get the T-shirts for merch, to get so much emails to write and to organize. But as soon as we did sound check, my nervousness went into adrenaline somehow, because at sound check I realized, yes, it's still working. I still can. I'm able to play guitar.
Yeah. I think I was as nervous as I was the first time my very first band played a big show. I was like completely, I don't know, out of my comfort zone because, new band, new songs. And, but it's like Hans said, the moment we arrived on stage and we started and the exchange of energy with the crowd started, it just turned into adrenaline and it was great.
Yeah, and that's true. I didn't remember being nervous at all before a show. Usually I'm excited, or yes, let's go on stage, even for big shows like Wacken or something, when you first play in Wacken. But in this case, that was crazy. And especially opening for my other band, it's like another level of pressure, you know all those guys there, and they will watch and they will, okay, that's a new band. Okay, I see,
Yeah.
So it was a bit of a pressure there, but it worked out fantastic. I mean, the people have been so welcoming and cheered us up. The energy was really, really, really crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I saw people talking about it online well before you guys played. Like, people that were saying they were going to that show were super excited about it. And I love that you guys both talk about being nervous, because that's such a cool thing to hear in the music industry, because I think a lot of people think after a while, everybody, musicians and even crew and stuff, we just get immune to it and we're just like, it's a show, whatever. But I mean, at the end of the day, everybody's still human. There are some things that are just going to emotionally get to you and make you feel those things. And I just think that's fantastic. And, with the Dark Side of the Moon, it's not like nobody knows each other. Even I would imagine, with Morten and Jenny in the band too, it's like all the other bands know each other. I'm sure it was a big, support moment. Did you have like Feuerschwanz, like side stage, like watching the whole show or anything?
Some of them were, I think, oh yeah, actually. The very first show, I spotted Jana in the crowd, and I think Rollo was next to the stage. Obviously Johanna joined us on stage. So there was like, I don't remember, because when you're in the show, you don't really scan the crowd and recognize everyone, but I remember seeing familiar faces, and it's so nice because you can see that they care.
Yeah, and Ben was watching the whole sound check, I think.
Yeah, true.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the Dark Side of the Moon, I mean, we've heard, you guys have talked about like the story of how the band has formed a ton, and we've talked about it on here. So for anybody that's not familiar, it was basically a bet, and that was the short version of it. But there was one thing I was curious about, and it's actually the name of the band. When it comes to the Dark Side of the Moon, I mean, right away in the music world, that name rings a big bell for a lot of people. For me personally, I was curious, have you guys run into any problems with that name just because of the Pink Floyd album name or anything like that? Or is there anything weird that's happened, or no?
No, I mean, you can't copyright the Dark Side of the Moon.
Yeah.
It's because it's the moon, obviously. You can't copyright the moon or the sun, It's such a much bigger thing than a album name, even though, of course, we respect the album and it's a great album and Pink Floyd is an awesome name. But for us, it's a metaphor for what we are doing. Like, we're showing the people the other side of the songs they seem to know, and we're showing them that dark side you don't see. You always see the bright side, but we're showing them the other hidden side. Yeah.
That is fantastic. I didn't even think about that. Now that I know that, it actually makes it a lot cooler, because to most people that know, half that album was those renditions of, songs that a lot of people recognize. I mean, I'll tell you what, I never expected to hear a, like kind of a metaled up version of like the Hedwig theme from Harry Potter. The second that came on, my wife was in the room, because we share an office up here, and she weaves and does artwork. And right when it came on, she was like, wait, is that what I think it is? And I was like, yep. Yep. And And I mean, God, I could talk about this album the whole podcast because there's so many things I want to ask and I want to talk about other things. But one of the things I noticed, and this is specifically for you, Melissa, I know in the music industry and especially like being a woman in metal and stuff like that, a lot of people talk about and expect harsh vocals. Like that's one of the big things that everybody always hears.
Yeah.
I don't think, if I remember right, on that whole album, while there was some layered in the background, there weren't any like lead standout harsh vocals until at least 3/4 of the way through that album. And I think there were only 2 songs that actually featured it.
Let me think. Jenny of Old Stones.
And that's what, the last track on the record.
And Priscilla.
And Priscilla.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember. There are some in the Witch. Yeah, the Hanging Tree. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There are some hidden like backing vocals in the Witcher. If I Had a Heart.
Yes.
And in Double Trouble. But yeah, it's definitely not like it's not growl dominated. Definitely not.
Yeah, and that's the one thing I was really I noticed. Because when it comes from a vocal standpoint for you, obviously you're known for both your clean voice, which is beautiful, and then the harsh tones, which we hear on a lot of other stuff that you've done. When you approach vocals for a project like this, do you ever have those thoughts that like, oh, I need to sing like this on this part, or does it just come natural when you're just doing it like whatever you feel in the moment?
It comes naturally. Like there are some parts that call for harsh vocals, and there are some parts that work better with clean vocals. And also I have to say that I can do a lot more with cleans because it's like you have this whole spectrum, and the harsh vocals is just a little part of it, and then there's all the other techniques that you can use as a vocalist. And I think for me, I put a lot more work into clean vocals. For me, growls is more like the easy part of the job, which I think should be used only when necessary, because I don't want it to turn into a gimmick, like, oh, that's what she does to impress people. You know what I mean? It has to serve the song.
Yeah, and I'm glad you used the word gimmick, because unfortunately, I don't want to suggest that any artists are doing it as a gimmick, but there are times where that's how it's taken by certain people. Like we see, and I see this as a YouTuber a lot, where somebody tells you to check out a metal band that has, a female vocalist, and you kind of automatically assume the reason that everybody wants you to see it is because she's going to be screaming at some point.
Yeah.
They want the shock value and stuff like that. And for me personally, that has kind of worn off at this point. Like I would don't get me wrong, I love my metal, but I would much rather hear those like beautiful parts that we got in this album with less harsh vocals, especially for something like this. But it's fantastic. And some of the guest spots on it too. Yeah. Fabienne was on there. And then the first time I listened, I didn't have the track list up. Like I like to listen without knowing what I'm going to get into, and immediately heard Tom England's voice and was just like, what? Like, and your voices sound so good together on that song.
Thank you. Yeah, he did such a great job. I mean, he did more than just singing, his interpretation brings you to the Misty Mountains.
Yeah. I mean, it's, Evergrey has become one of my favorite bands in the last few years, and just hearing him on there and stuff like that. And then the other thing too, and I want to move to Hans really quick, and I already probably give you too much credit. Like there are so many times where I really do believe this. I don't just say this because you're here. I really think that, to me, you are one of the best guitar players that in any band that I've been listening to lately. And it blows my mind that you're not brought up in conversation more. There were parts on that album when you were doing guitar leads where I was just sitting here like smiling, because I was the tones that you achieved on that album are amazing. But the thing I like about your playing, on this album and in Feuerschwanz and tons of other things, is you can hear the feel in your playing. A lot of people just shred to shred. But what I love about this album in particular is that I can feel your playing and your emotion in that. And I just really wanted to give you props for that, because it's the playing is just fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And especially this is because that's what I want to do. I don't want to play for guitar players. I want to play for everybody, and even though I don't have lyrics on my guitar, I try to create a story which takes the listener somewhere, even though it's just a melody. And that's what I try to achieve. But that's the ultimate goal, basically, for me. Yeah. And basically what you said earlier about the growling part for Melissa, that's like if you would, as a guitar player, sweep pick everything from beginning to start. And it's just a small bit of dynamic expression, I think. That's the growling. And so if you do it too much, it gets boring. But if you do it at the right place, it transports the exact feeling you want to transport. Yeah.
That's a really good analogy for that. I'm going to have to remember that, because I've said a million times, there are guitar players out there that are just absolute shredders that can arpeggio and sweep pick and play faster than anybody. But after a while, that just loses it with me. It's like, I want feel and emotion and melody in the guitar, and not saying that, you can't do that while you're shredding, but just after a while, like you said, you're playing for everyone and not just other guitar players. There are definitely bands I can listen to that, it's like the biggest fans of these bands are other musicians, because they are listening to what's going on and they're like, oh, wow, that's cool. The normal person, and this is just fact, this is nothing against anybody that listens to music, because not everybody's going to know music theory and terminology. The normal person doesn't know what an arpeggio or what goes into sweep picking or anything like that. They're just hearing it.
Exactly.
So,
but that's the biggest goal, I think, to reach the heart of the normal person,
So when go ahead, sorry.
No, sorry.
Well, when you worked on this album, did you do it like you normally do it? Like, did you record everything there where you are now and just send everything in?
Sitting right here where I'm sitting now.
Yeah. And then for you, Melissa, did you go anywhere for vocal production or anything like that, or did you do everything on your own and then send it in?
I recorded with Jacob.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
I imagine that's got to be an interesting experience, because I mean, it for a lot of Americans, I don't think they really are aware of Jacob's pedigree, but in Europe, I mean, you hear his name and you just it's gonna sound good. What's that experience like, being in his studio and recording with him?
Oh, it's great, because first of all, he is an amazing person, and he just makes you feel super comfortable when you're recording with him. So for me, being in a comfortable environment is very important, especially when you're the kind of person who's very hard on yourself, because you start to push yourself and you need to be in the comfort zone, in certain comfort, to try things without being afraid of trying in front of someone, because that's a very vulnerable place. And Jacob, I've been recording now with him for a few years, so if my voice goes somewhere it's not supposed to go to, I feel very confident that he will not make fun of me, And it's just, first of all, it's very, very, very comfortable to just have to sing and not record, edit, and all that. He does this perfectly. And it's always fun with him, because, there's this little ritual when you arrive. Usually we chat a little bit, have tea, coffee. In the middle of the day, there's cake or whatever. So it's just like, it's a very, very comfortable situation to record.
Yeah. Recording
Next time I will go there as well. At least for mixing or something. I heard so much about that coffee that I have to.
That's awesome, dude. I mean, vibe while you're recording is a big thing. Like when I first moved to Nashville, when I wasn't touring, I worked as a production assistant at a studio, and when we'd have bands come in, our producer would give me a list of things that like the band had requested to make them feel comfortable. And just specifically talking about vocals, for one thing, it's like we'd get certain drinks or whatever the vocalist wanted, but there was one band that I worked for where I like decked out the entire vocal booth, and it almost looked like this really gothic, like there was tapestries on the walls and they had me light candles and stuff, and that's the vibe that they wanted to be comfortable in. So it's interesting to see, especially working for so many bands, like what kind of environment makes the bands that you're working with comfortable, because that does play a big part into a lot of that.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Was Marilyn Manson? Was it Marilyn Manson?
No, it was actually a Christian band.
Oh, really? Because I heard the story about, we once played a festival here in Germany, and Marilyn Manson was playing the other day or the day before. And apparently it was requested that his backstage room was all in black.
That's a thing. Like I've had friends that I had a production assistant friend that did a tour with Marilyn Manson once, and said that his entire dressing room has to be lined with like black. I think they were just using like tarps or like Visqueen or like, you know, they were just lining black sheets on all the walls and stuff like that. And I also heard that he prefers his dressing room to be like freezing cold. So they bring in like mobile industrial air conditioners, and they keep his dressing room at like 50 degrees, which I mean, Celsius, you're talking like, that's like 15.
Oh, that's interesting. I would hate it as a vocalist, but
or 10 Celsius, sorry. 10 Celsius dressing room. That's what I would figure, because I've worked for artists that if it's like too cold in a room, I'm like, they're sitting on the bus with a humidifier all day until they go inside, you know? So some of that, I wonder how much with some artists though, some of that is like, because Marilyn Manson has a very specific image. I wonder how much of that is just feeding into the allure and the image of Marilyn Manson, you know? So that kind of stuff I always think about too. But one of the big things I've thought about with the Dark Side of the Moon as well, and I'm curious, I'm sure this started because you both have other bands and you're both super busy. I'm sure this started in mind as the idea of like what we would call a side project, but the Dark Side of the Moon seems to me like this is a very serious project that you're going to put a lot of time into. How do you guys all get together? And it's not just you two, you know, Morton's doing Amaranth. Like, how do you guys even find the time to all get together and write or perform or anything? Like, how is this going to work in the future for you guys?
Well, we will make it happen somehow. You know, we are already talking about touring, and there's some serious talks already happening, combined with some late night whiskey drinks. And then we're playing 2 festivals this year, and we hopefully will play much more after the album is out and people start to know us better. And we already did put a lot of work in it, so of course we have to somehow to take the fruits as well of the work, of the labor.
I mean, you guys at this point, you guys should just do a tour with a package of the Dark Side of the Moon, Feuerschwanz, and Amaranth, and then everybody's there. And you guys
would be perfect. That would be perfect.
Well, the other thing too, I mean, then you got to start thinking about though, like endurance and stuff. Each of you guys would have to perform 2 sets a night, which is probably not that great in terms of, I mean, especially for you, Melissa. I mean, if you do 1 full show vocally and then have to go do another one, I mean, I imagine that's got to be pretty challenging.
That's Yep. I mean, depends on the length of the show. And, you know, I think I also realized what's difficult for me is to perform 1 set, rest, and then go back on stage. Like, for example, these shows, I was joining Feuerschwanz on stage after, during their encore, which was maybe 2 hours after our set. And I remember the first day I arrived next to the stage and I'm like, am I still warm? So it's like you perform, you have the adrenaline, then you cool down and you're like,
And there's also a certain sense of, for me, working for bands, you know, it's very popular in a lot of the industries in the US touring for the headlining band to have one of the vocalists from the opening bands come out at some point and do a song with them. And I've seen that happen where like the artist that I've been working for was an opener on a tour, and somewhere in the headliner set they need to go out. And not that they don't enjoy doing it, but there are some times where I could tell it's like, we've already finished our show, they're relaxed and they're not warm anymore, and they're already in that I'm done for the night mentality. And then I go get them and I'm like, hey, we got to be back on stage in 5 minutes. And they're like,
well, it was not difficult because it's always super fun. It was more in terms of a performance that I had to, you know, re-warm up and you know, for example, with our set, we put the hardest songs at the end because then I'm not the hardest songs. Let's say the song where I have the highest notes comes on the second part of the set because then I'm warm, etc. So when you cool down and you go back on stage for a guest performance that potentially you have to be full on, it's like you're 5 minutes before you're like, oh, okay, I'm ready.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine that's probably the most difficult part. I mean, it'd be like, you know, warming up, going and doing, you know, working out for an hour and then taking a break and then having to do it all over again without being warm. I mean, that wouldn't be, you know, that'd be challenging for anybody is what I'm trying to say.
Yep.
Now, so recently, Melissa, you were out traveling with Camelot. How intensive was it for you on that tour? Were you pretty much singing the entire set, or was it specific songs?
I was singing, depending on the set list, 7 or 8 songs per night.
Okay. How is it like traveling as a guest? Obviously, I'm sure you know some of them, but how is it like traveling as a guest just for a tour like that?
It's great.
Yeah.
It's just so great. I mean, first of all, the guys from Camelot, they're just very, very nice and thoughtful, and I had the easiest time because, you know, I didn't have any responsibility in terms of organization, except from, you know, getting to the tour and getting from back home. So I had a very, very good time, and it was very comfortable. And I don't know, I've said it before, but Camelot is a band that inspired me a lot. So it was also very, very cool to perform on stage some songs that I already knew from listening to them or seeing Camelot on stage. It was really, really nice.
Oh, that's cool. And that was that. There's so much going on that I read everything I see and I sometimes forget. Was that tour South America?
So we did South America and then Europe.
Okay. So you did the Europe one too?
Yeah.
Oh, that's wild. I've actually still never toured South America. How do you enjoy that?
It was, you know what? I thought it would be super tough because you fly from between every show actually. And I was prepared for really, you know, hardcore schedule with like 2 hours of sleep, then going to the airport. And in fact, it was a lot easier than I thought. And it was my first time ever in South America. So I really I was both enjoying the experience of touring in South America and being sort of a tourist there. And we had great experience with great people. And it's so different than Europe. For example, first time, like the first day was in, I think, Santiago in Chile. And we arrive at the airport and there's some fans waiting. And I'm like, what? Like, oh, hey, welcome to Chile. And I'm like, what? And then at the hotel and then at the venue. And it was so crazy and so like heartwarming.
I've only seen that once. I worked for a band, and when we went to the Philippines, we did a show in Manila, and it was the same thing. I've never seen this before ever, but when we walked out of the front doors of the airport, there were fans at 11 o'clock at night with signs like, welcome, we can't wait to see you. And I was like, wow, like that's why I always think, like, especially And obviously the European music market and the North American music market are different, but I feel like people in North America sometimes are spoiled because you don't really see that much unless it's like a massive, like if you're Taylor Swift, you'll see that. But this was like, this band I was working for was like what I would consider like a mid-level rock band. And it's like, we're going to other countries and you see that. So like I'm sure to see that. I've heard so much about South American crowds and how crazy they are. And like, we've seen videos and stuff. And I could only imagine that some of those shows were just probably just the highest energy you've probably seen in a while.
It's insane. I told the guys it felt like being in a football stadium because of how loud people were.
Yeah.
Crazy.
That's wild. Man. Hans, have you done South American touring?
No.
No? Yeah.
No, Feuerschwanz is limited. For quite a while, we have been limited to German-speaking countries, and you don't fly to Austria or Switzerland.
Yeah,
But just recently we went to Spain, and we will return to Spain. So we are expanding within Europe slowly to non-German-speaking countries.
I mean, the tour that you guys just did was pretty long. I mean, the Memento Mori tour, and you had a lot of different guests. I know War Kings was on the whole thing, and then towards the end, Dark Side of the Moon opened, and then you also had Angus McSix and stuff like that. But it was a pretty extensive tour. And from what I'm seeing over from North America is a lot of these of bands in your genre of music or German speaking bands and stuff like that are starting to travel a lot more, which is really cool. That tour for you guys, I mean, you already mentioned Spain. I mean, what other countries are you guys actually hitting now with like the last album coming out and stuff?
So this summer we will go to Italy for a festival.
Oh, cool.
And again to Spain, and again to Czech Republic, and hopefully to France maybe. And so we slowly expand within the non-German speaking countries in Europe. But the nice thing about Germany is if you're starting or growing as a band in Germany, you basically we just played 19 shows within like 5 weeks or 5 weeks. And that was Germany, 1 show in Austria, and 3 shows in 1 show in Switzerland and 3 shows in Austria. So that's a full tour, and almost of all of the shows have been sold out, almost. So that's quite a lot, I mean, there are lots of venues you can play, and there are lots of people in Germany. So there's a very good foundation to survive as a band.
I feel like the German music market right now is kind of exploding, because quite a few years ago, obviously North America, I mean, well, the whole world, it's not even arguable that we could say Rammstein is the biggest German band. I mean, everybody in the world at this point is familiar. But in my discovery of music, I've started learning about other German bands that are massive. Like a good example of that is like Die Ärzte. Like, never heard of them in my life until I started doing YouTube, because they don't have a North American presence.
Yeah.
But I watch their videos, and it's like arenas and stadiums, and it's like...
Sure. But I think they already played their farewell tour, I think. I'm not sure.
I believe they did, but...
You might be behind a little bit.
I do, dude. I'm so behind, because even when I was growing up, the only German bands, like metal bands, that I was really aware of were Rammstein, obviously, because when Du Hast came out in North America, it was over. Like, everybody, that was a #1 song in the US on rock radio for like a year.
Wow.
And then surprisingly, Heaven Shall Burn was the only other German band that I really knew, because they were on Century Media Records, and they would send out the sampler CDs back in the day, and they were on one of the sampler CDs. But doing this YouTube channel, I have been just discovering so many bands where it really hit me recently. I was like, I think Germany might have one of the biggest metal markets, or not even just metal, just music in general, that like nobody in North America knows about. Because every month I'm discovering a new band where I'm just like, where have I been with this? Like, it's crazy. So to see all these bands starting to get popular in North America now is wild. Like, Melissa, when you were talking about visiting South America for the first time, it made me remember, like, I love working for bands that are traveling places for the first time to get to see their experience.
Mm-hmm.
And in February and March, I was guitar teching for Powerwolf over here when they came here. So getting to be with them and watching them experience North America for the very first time was a very cool thing, because there were some things that they were blown away about, and but the shows were wild. It's first time in the US. I think almost every single show sold out in advance. And now you've got the same thing going on with Electric Callboy. I think 14 of their 17 shows in North America are sold out, and the tour doesn't start for 3 months. Like Lord of the Lost said that they're coming here next year. Like, we're starting to get a lot more international bands coming over here more, and the shows are doing better than a lot of American bands shows are doing. So a lot of stuff's changing.
It's wild. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would love, Hans, we talked last time, I would love for Feuerschwanz to get over here. And I think at this point, you guys would probably have a very, very good turnout for those shows. And, I would imagine, Melissa, for you guys, and I got to ask, this is a constant argument on my Discord, my channel, whatever. Do you pronounce your band name
I knew
Ad
it.
Infinitum or Ad Infinitum?
Ad Infinitum.
Thank you. Okay. Because it is a common thing to hear people say ad infinitum a lot. But I've heard you say ad infinitum, and when I say it on my channel, there's always like 20 comments where people are like, it's pronounced the other way. And I'm like, okay.
Well, I go with the Latin version because it's Latin. So I don't know.
Yeah.
People can call the band whatever they want as long as they enjoy the music and they come to concerts.
Well, it's like,
You're right.
that's like with my dad with Feuerschwanz. Like every time I talk to my dad, and I've corrected him a million times, and he loves the band.
Really?
But he doesn't know any German, so I think he always says Feuerschwanz. And I'm like, and at this point I'm just done correcting him. I'm just like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Whatever. But for you guys with Ad Infinitum, like, the record came out March, I think, right? It was like March 31st or something like that.
Yeah.
Fantastic album. And
Thank you.
again, it's one of those that, with the people that are credited on it, we knew it was going to sound good, and it's fantastic. I saw that you've got some dates coming up with like Arch Enemy over the summer and other stuff like that. I mean, it's just, again, it doesn't stop with you guys, but when you get dates like that with a band like that, how different is your set list going to be? Do you guys really rethink that for the crowd, or do you just go up there and do your thing?
No, we really think about this because now we have 3 albums, so it's easier to sort of feature, like to create an atmosphere depending on the kind of event we're playing at. And definitely, I mean, we already started talking about the set list for those shows, and picking maybe let's say, some of the songs featuring the heavier breakdowns or the more harsh vocals, or to kind of set the tone for the evening and not be like, oh, let's play all of our ballads. And then Arch Enemy comes on stage and we're like puppies, But yeah.
I'd be surprised. I've seen some bands do that where they're just like, the headlining band is going to be heavier than hell, so let's play our not heavy songs and see how it goes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like when I talked to Chris Harms about the dates they did with Iron Maiden, I was like, how much do you switch up your set list? And he was like, there were a few days of moving things around, because we could tell there were moments at the start where some of the crowd was just not into it, and we would just have to change it. And I think a lot of the times the bands I've worked for is once they pick their set list, they kind of stick with it. But there are those times where you need to constantly adapt to the crowd, because if something's not working, at the end of the day, you should be playing what the crowd wants to hear.
Yeah.
Even though I know there's songs that artists absolutely hate playing every night.
Yeah. There are songs, like, for example, there's one particular song that, I don't know, for some reason we it's a little bit trickier live, and we're like, after the last festival season, I think we said, yeah, now when we got new material, the song is out of the set list. And then we're like, okay, maybe for the Arch Enemy shows, we can put it back on.
Yeah. That's so fun, man. I mean, I'm excited that I've started getting back on tour. So hearing these tour stories from you guys is like really making me excited for the summer. Because the Powerwolf thing I did was the first time I've been on the road in almost 3 years. And the Electric Callboy thing will be interesting as well. And that tour is interesting to me because, you know, when you go, like we were talking about you guys opening for Arch Enemy, you look at bills with openers and sometimes, you know, things usually make sense. And one of the openers that we have in the Electric Callboy tour is a band I've never heard of that are from Sweden that I was just like, this is so interesting to be doing a North American tour, and the direct support band is a Swedish band that's like fairly new that I've never heard of. But at the same time, those are really cool situations for those bands because they might open up to a pretty big audience. Do you think that's going to be a situation on the Arch Enemy stuff, or do you think there's already probably a pretty big fan crossover at that point? Like, do a lot of their fans probably know you guys already?
No, I think that definitely we go there with with the goal to conquer new fans who maybe have never ever heard of Ad Infinitum before because they are more into the harsher metal, let's say. Yeah. But I also think that some Arch Enemy fans are interested in lots of different kind of bands, metal bands. For example, I can see it on Patreon when I talk to people and they're like, oh, I follow Arch Enemy and Ad Infinitum and Feuerschwanz, and because they just like music, and as long as it's something that reaches them in a certain way, that touches them in a certain way, they will like it and they're curious. So I think that we will not be strangers to everyone, but definitely to a lot of people.
Yeah. And that's a good thing though. I mean, if it, you know, when you're on an opening slot, if you can win over one person in that crowd, that's the goal. And because you never know how many people that one person is going to tell about your band too.
Yeah.
The other thing I was curious about, because we've talked about you guys being in so many bands and doing different things, it seems to me that the European music market, because a lot of you guys are closer together as well, it seems like everybody is insanely connected, not just the bands, but the crews and stuff too. Excuse me. Because I mean, even we've talked about, you know, both of you, but even members of your other bands are doing other things. I mean, everybody's always busy and stuff like that. I guess it's just the timing thing just blows my mind with you guys. Like, I just don't understand how you guys are able to do all this, but even the crews, if I'm not mistaken, Hans, your front of house engineer, is it Felix?
Yeah, he's our main front of house engineer too. Yeah, he's a Powerwolf front of house engineer, right? We made
it through that whole tour together.
And the tour manager, Tom, you know Tom?
Yeah, our production manager, Tom.
Yeah. He made monitor on one of the 3 or 4 of the shows.
No way. Yeah, those guys were so nice. But we made it through that whole tour, and Felix, he kind of mentioned that he had done stuff with Feuerschwanz before, but he didn't tell me he was going to be doing that tour. And I think it was Ben on Instagram was like, "Oh, Felix says hi," and I was like, "Wait, what?" So it's like everybody works for everybody. And then the funniest thing is I asked the Powerwolf people, like their camp, I was like, just out of curiosity, like, why am I here? Why didn't you bring your own guitar tech? And they're like, well, our guitar tech is actually in another band that's touring right now. They're like, you know who Ghost Kid is? And I was like, yes, because I'm friends with Sebastian as well. And they're like, yeah, that's like Yapo is our normal guitar tech. So it's like, that's kind of mind blowing to me too, that a lot of people that are in bands are also working for other bands when they're not touring. Like, that's not as normal over here.
Yeah, so I think you see that quite often, that if you're a musician in a smaller band, that, I mean, you have to earn a living as well. So I know some people doing front of house for other bands and running their own bands. And I think Melissa, your drummer from Ad Infinitum, did the same for quite a while.
He did, yeah, for a while. For example, during the tour we did with Amaranth and Beyond the Black and Butcher Babies, he was also in the Beyond the Black crew.
Wow. I knew he had teched. I just didn't know that he was like doing it while you were touring.
It was wild. This guy, he's like, I don't know if he knows what sleep means.
Yeah. I mean, at that point, there's got to be a love of it, because I'll tell you right now, as much as I loved playing music when I was younger, I love working for bands. Like, I love working on instruments. So I would imagine it's got to be the same. Like, he probably loves playing, but also loves doing that too, if he's doing both.
Yeah, I mean, and he's also teaching. I mean, Nick he touches everything in the music business. He's an incredible musician, and not only drummer but also guitar player. He's a singer too. He's a teacher of all the instruments you can think of, probably. And it's funny because I just got a notification from him on my screen. It's like he heard it. Hey, Nick. And he's been teching and he's producing, recording. I mean, he's one of those talented people.
the more I hear from European artists about this kind of stuff, I feel like another example, Roel from Powerwolf. I was helping him with his drums every day on that tour, and he was telling me when they're home, he's teaching. Like he's just doing lessons and teaching nonstop. And I'm just like, that's even crazy for me, for a band the size of Powerwolf, that when he's not touring, he's teaching. Because I feel like the more I hear about this, I feel like in North America, there's an image thing where people want to be rock stars, and there's something about only being in a band and not doing anything else that people feel like if they achieve that, then, you know, they sound like rock stars. Where on the flip side of that, I see all these people in Europe that when they're off tour, they're just doing other things they love doing that involves music, like teaching or teching or something like that. And, you know, Hans, I got to imagine, you know, you got a room full of gear. When you're probably off tour, you're probably working on a ton of other stuff too.
Yeah, sure, of course. I mean, you have to get occupied and you have to pay your rent, obviously.
Yep.
And to be honest, you know, like it's not 20 years ago, and CD sales went down, and you don't get that much of money anymore. And I think the times of those rock stars you mentioned are over. There aren't these kind of rock stars anymore. Maybe the big ones like Metallica or something, but they went big like last century, you know, last millennium even. And you have to be creative about other things, but it's not necessarily a bad thing, I think, to go into other fields and experience other things, just instead of just being in that one band, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was having this conversation on one of my previous podcasts. I had two of the guys from Brand of Sacrifice on, and we were kind of talking about that, how it's been about 20 years now, if you really think about it, since the last time there were like rock or metal artists that were just larger than life. And it was like kind of the new metal movement in the early 2000s, you know, where you had bands, you know, you like Limp Bizkit, that was just mainstream on the covers of everything and stuff like that. Like, we haven't seen that in a long time. And I think a big part of that is the culture element to it. You know, one of the guys from Brand of Sacrifice made a good point, that he's like, look at that new metal movement. There was a culture involved. There was a certain style that people had. There was certain clothes and things that people wore. You know, Fred Durst wearing the backwards red Yankees cap was an iconic thing. And there were certain clothing styles that you could look at somebody and know that was a metalhead, or they liked this or whatever. And there isn't really much of that going on right now. Like, metal has become so widespread that, like, when I go to concerts, you know, back in the day when I went to concerts, every single person there looked like a metalhead. Nowadays, that it's people from all different walks of everywhere that are at these concerts, which is a great thing. Like, it is cool to see that. But I do think that like you just said, the days of those larger than life rock stars are kind of behind us, especially because social media has made everybody instantly accessible. You know, back years ago, there were bands that I idolized that like the closest you'd ever see to them is going to a show or maybe reading about them in a magazine. But now those artists are replying to every comment on social media, and they're doing TikToks, and I think it's a combination of a lot of things that have led to that, but I do think you are right. I think the days of the big, huge, massive rock star is pretty much gone. So, I mean, it's interesting to sit and talk about because it's like, you know, just the changes in the last 20 years in the music industry have been crazy.
I think that new metal thing that evolved somehow from that alternative metal scene, like Nirvana and stuff. I think afterwards the new metal stuff came Limp Bizkit, Linkin Park, and then maybe Nickelback, if you want to consider it.
I mean, listen, I love Nickelback. When people bring up Nickelback, they think I'm gonna like say something bad. I love that band. Like, they write good songs, they sound fantastic, but yeah. And now the funniest thing now though is that all that movement is coming back because the kids that were teenagers when the new metal movement was happening are in their mid-30s now. So now Limp Bizkit is touring again, selling out arenas. You've got like Korn never went away. They're still huge. A lot of these big new metal bands, everything's a giant cycle. It's just wild. And I never believed it because my dad told me that when I was a kid. He's like, all these cultural things and all these music stuff, it moves in cycles. And here we are in 2023 and new metal is huge again. It's just wild.
It happens with everything. Like when now I see tons of kids wearing clothes that my parents forced me to wear when I was a kid, and I'm like, no way in hell I would wear this.
Were Jankos popular in Europe? Do you know what that is?
I don't know what that is.
No.
Janko was a clothing company that made jeans in like the late 90s, early 2000s. The huge wide legs. Yeah. Those are making a comeback in the States right now, and I haven't seen those since like 99.
I know. I got this. I had those when I was at school, but like they were like somehow tight, and then the legs in French it was called elephant legs.
Makes sense, yeah.
Elephant legs, because it's like this.
The big popular Janko line that they had was called Mammoths, which is like the same thing. So it's like
man-made.
Yeah, like, and it's the legs, you could fit like 5 people's legs in them. I mean, they were like this wide. It was ridiculous. But yeah, all that stuff's coming back. But since we've talked about your music so much, I'm always curious, what do you guys enjoy listening to? Like, if you're just sitting at home and you're not focusing on your own stuff, what are each of you guys enjoying listening to?
Oh, that's difficult. That's everything basically. Yeah. So from Prince to Frank Zappa to classical guitar music, and metal, of course.
Yeah.
But I can't say, oh, that one record or that one band is my favorite for the past year. I think these times have been over for me, basically, because I start to analyze too much when I'm listening to music, especially to metal music. So yeah, I enjoy a lot of. I really like funk music, really like Prince and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So how about you, Melissa?
I listen to a little bit of everything as well. Metal, pop, rock, like. Seriously, anything that is well made and that stands out for any reason, I appreciate. Also learning from, to be honest, because it's funny to. So I read so many comments saying, "This is metal. This is not metal. This and that," and I'm like, if only people knew that metal evolves because metal musicians listen to a broad spectrum of music and bring what they hear into metal and turn it into something new or bring new sounds. And that's what I do, both for, you know, in my free time to enjoy music, and when I'm working on something new, I'm like listening to, for example, typically when I recorded for the Dark Side of the Moon's album, I was recording the Legends Never Die, and we were paying attention to the harmonies that were made in the original song. And I was telling Jacob, I would never have thought about things like this. It's not something I've ever heard in metal. And I feel like listening to as much music as possible that you like and that inspires you helps you evolve as musicians.
Right. Either you like it or you don't. Either it touches you, it reaches to you or not. It doesn't matter if it's metal or hard rock or synthie pop or rap music even. So if it has something to say to you personally, then it's good.
Yeah, that's how I feel. And admittedly, when I was younger, I was that kind of person that, you know, if it didn't have double bass and screaming in it, it sucks. You know, and we're all young and we learn and stuff like that. But I will say, doing this YouTube channel has opened me up to so much stuff. And I've always had the take on music as I've been an adult that, like, I don't care what it is. If it makes me feel good, I'm going to listen to it. But I do see a lot of comments, you know, people on YouTube, and it's easy for people on the internet to be trolls and to be critical. And critical is not a good word because they're not critical. They're just saying stupid things. But yeah, there's stuff that we check out where either it's not heavy enough to some people and they're like, this isn't real metal. Or then I listen to something super heavy and they're like, oh, this is just noise. Like, I don't like my metal like this. It's like, you can't win. And that's why recently I had a lot of people leaving comments that are like, they think when I do reactions, which I've been doing less of lately, when I do reactions, people are like, they're like, you know, your reactions have to be fake because you enjoy too much stuff. I was like, well, no, I approach music in the sense of trying to enjoy it rather than trying to find something that I don't enjoy. So for example, it's easy to not like something if you listen to it for the first time and you're trying to be impressed. You know what I mean? So I've had moments where even if I don't like a song, there are other elements that I can enjoy. For example, like there have been songs that the overall song I didn't like, but I can be like, the production on this is fantastic. Like, this song isn't for me, but the production's fantastic. Like, that solo was good. The vocal harmonies are good. You know, it's easier to find the positives out of something than try and find all the negatives in something. And there are still a lot of people that just try and find the negatives in the music they're listening to, which is kind of unfortunate. And Hans, one of the things I wanted to touch on that you said was you had mentioned hip hop. I think it would blow a lot of people's minds if they knew that some of their favorite metal artists, and I'm talking like extreme metal, they're influenced by hip hop. Like Phil, the singer for Whitechapel, like deathcore band, he said his vocal inspiration is like 3-6 Mafia. And then Ali from Archspire, his vocal influence is like Tech 9. Like, a lot of these metal vocalists are, their influences are heavily from like the rap and hip hop world because of the flow and the delivery and stuff like that. And I think people get surprised when they hear that, but there's also a cultural connection between hip hop and metal being kind of at times the outcasts of the music scene. So I think
you have to be in hip hop, the vocals have to be super tight rhythmically, and that's not a bad thing even for vocalists, I think.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I mean, I enjoy a lot of hip hop, and again, going back to the German music scene, there's actually a lot of German hip hop I've been getting into lately, even though I don't understand half of it because I'm still taking my German lessons. I'm getting better.
Okay.
But yeah, it's just, I've just been absolutely loving discovering music lately, and it's really centered around Europe. I mean, there's so much good undiscovered music out there. And, you know, even when we do my Twitch streams on the weekends, I let people request things. There are unsigned bands from different areas of Europe that are so good.
That's cool.
That unfortunately, just whether it's circumstance or time and place, it's like, some of these bands will never get discovered by a lot of people, even though they are insanely talented.
Well, it's a long way until you make it to the top, to quote someone. But I mean, you have to start, go out and play clubs and go on the internet, and there are no shortcuts. You know, we both are sitting here because we play a lot of live shows and we did a lot of work. You know, you can't just sit and wait for things to happen. And
I also think that you were comparing to the time where big rock stars emerged. The game has changed a lot, and now you have to be a musician. You have to be you have to know the technical aspect of it. You need to sometimes know how to record, how to edit. You need to be a social media manager. You need to be you need to be on top of the game with your administration. You need to be there's like so much in the job description right now that I feel like it holds back a lot of talented musicians who are maybe not so comfortable with the rest of what's to be done.
Yeah, you need to be a photographer. You need to know how to cut videos. You know, there's so much stuff to do as a musician.
That's a great point. And it is. It's like the more you have to focus on those other things, the less time you have to focus on your actual music, which is, you know, the unfortunate side effect. But we do see some bands that do everything in house at this point. It's like there are bands that I see music videos from that when you see the credits for the music video, it's like somebody in their band owns a production company or somebody has edited it and stuff like that. And, you know, those are some of the bands, especially now, like, you know, again, like I don't really get into it, but like TikTok is like the big social media meta right now. So it's like those bands that are cranking out TikTok content.
Yeah, TikTok is strange. TikTok is crazy.
I think I'm too old for TikTok.
Yeah, me too. But we're doing the Feuerschwanz. We're doing quite well on TikTok because we have someone taking care of the TikTok side for Feuerschwanz. But we had one thing that went some kind of viral on TikTok, which was our cover of Dragos der Dinte, and you immediately could see it on Spotify. You know, there was the views went up on TikTok, and at the same time the plays on Spotify for that song went up. So that's like people seem to hear it on TikTok and then go to Spotify and listen to the full song, you know. But it's so strange because it's not natural for a musician to be on TikTok because the usual stuff you do, like the video snippets from concerts and stuff like that doesn't work on TikTok. Basically, you need to make a fool out of yourself. And there's a certain border which you want to cross or not as a musician. And for Feuerschwanz, it's okay, but for other bands, I don't know.
I mean, I had, no joke, like 2 days ago, out of 3 years I've been doing social media, I had my first, like what I would consider actual viral moment. And it was because I complained about Eurovision and I put it on TikTok. Dude, it had 1 million views in like 2 days.
Whoa.
Okay.
And I was
That's
like,
cool.
And I was talking to my wife about this because she's an artist and she weaves and makes art and stuff. And she's like, I don't understand. Like, I try so hard on some of these videos and stuff like that, and they never do anything. And I was like, you know what? I have realized the more time and effort that I put into something on social media, the worse it does.
Yeah.
And when I just put out something dumb and don't think about it, it does the best. And I don't understand it. Like, one of the best viewed videos I have on YouTube in the last month is a video I did about the guy in the crowd at the Sleep Token concert that farted so loud that the whole crowd heard it. That video, I don't know if you saw that, but during a slow part of their set, it was at a small club in Sydney.
But are you really surprised?
No,
the video title itself wants me to view it right now.
I mean, no,
same.
I'm not surprised. It's like the moment. Now, I've heard from some people that it was fake, but just for the lore of it, we want to believe it wasn't. But it was a moment where the whole band walked off stage and the singer was just playing piano and singing. And when there was a break in the music, you just hear a super loud fart and the whole crowd like laughs. That video within a week got like 175,000 views on YouTube. And I was like, why is it that when I do like a video that I actually put time into, nothing happens? but then I do something stupid like this, and everybody was like, because it's farts. Like, people are children.
Oh my
And I'm
You have to
like,
fart more.
so that's the weird thing about the social media dynamic with music right now. It's like it's about, and we saw that when reactions were blowing up. Like, when reactions started blowing up over the pandemic, all the videos that did the best were the ones that had those shock value moments, whether it was you know, the Pisces by Ginger, like when Tatiana switches to the harsh folk, even Ding, even the bridge in Ding, when you come in, Melissa, and there's harsh vocals, like that was one of those viral reaction videos too, because it had that shock moment, or your Slaughter to Prevail, or your Lorna Shore. And
oh yeah,
that's why I see bands like you know, like Electric Callboy is a great example. Every one of their music videos is so ridiculously over the top because it makes for those moments. And that's what bands are doing now, because again, social media has changed so much for the music industry that, you know, it's not like the MTV days when I was a kid where I would sit for hours and just watch music videos.
oh yeah.
People.
But that also means you have to, the louder you scream, the more you get heard. That's not sure that's a good thing for music, you know.
Yeah, but also it also means that people jump on the hype train, and then there's like so many of the same videos.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's why like Nick Nocturnal, you know, I know you guys are probably familiar with Nick. Like, we talk here and there, and it's like reactions aren't special anymore. Like, a few years ago, reaction videos on YouTube were like, it felt cool doing it because I was introducing music to people, and you know, it was something of value. Now there are so many reactors that have started doing the same things that it's almost not special anymore. It's like, okay, if a new music video comes out and I don't get to it right away, there's already been 50 people that have done it. And after a while, it's just like, you know, it's the same thing over and over. And, you know, but I will say, I do talk to a lot of record labels, and they say a lot of them still see the effect of reaction videos. Like, I've had some labels tell me, like, if a handful of larger YouTubers do reactions to specific releases, they'll see that on Spotify. They'll see that in pre-orders for albums. Like, it is kind of a crazy thing, but I personally don't know how much longer reactions are going to be like a popular thing on YouTube anymore, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody's going to have to find the next cool thing to do to, like, you know, feature music and stuff, because reactions just aren't doing it anymore.
And also there are not many that stand out. Like, for example, yours are great because you explain something more than just, you know, like watching a video and be like, I liked it.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. I know what you're saying.
Or another one that I really appreciate is the charismatic voice.
Oh yeah,
because I was so happy when she reacted to I don't remember which song it was, because she did a couple of them, but she was like, oh, and listen to the harmony there. That's it was like, oh, she heard it. You know, those things that in the studio you're like, oh, I should put this harmony. Nobody's gonna notice, but it's gonna do something. And I was like, oh, she noticed.
Yeah, and like, for her, like, I know her and her husband pretty well. Like, they're really good people, but there are some things that she talks about that even for me, it's like over my head. I'm just like, I learned something from her when I'm watching stuff, because where my specialty is just gear and instruments and production, the things she talks about vocally sometimes are mind blowing to me. I'm like, wow, I wouldn't have even thought about that. Yeah. So it's all the stuff is very interesting. But you know, before I let you guys go, because we've been here a little longer than I told you we were going to, thank you. I've asked you both this before, but I still like to do it right now with how everything's going in the music industry and social media, touring, whatever. What are some of the best ways that you think fans of your bands and your music can help support you guys directly?
Well, first of all, buy the CDs. We're talking about direct support, buy the merch, stream the videos, stream the songs on Spotify, write comments, tell us how you like it, follow us on Instagram, Spotify, share it, exactly, yeah. Be involved, be active, not just passive, basically. Yeah.
Awesome.
That's good.
Well, to everybody out there listening, just as a reminder, Metamorphosis, the first album from Dark Side of the Moon, released recently. There we go. May 12th it came out already. It's out now. It's a fantastic record. I love it. I listened to it start to finish twice last night or 2 nights ago when I was doing stuff. Melissa's band, Ad Infinitum, released their third album, Downfall, on March 31st. That's available everywhere. And then on July 7th, the brand new Feuerschwanz.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even notice you were wearing that. The brand new Feuerschwanz album comes out July 7th. It's called Fegefeuer. I'm excited for that one as well. You guys have a lot going on, man. So I appreciate the time that you took to sit here and talk with me today. This was super fun to catch up with you guys.
Thanks a lot
Thank
for
you
the
so much.
invitation.
Yeah, of
it's
course.
always fun to talk to you. And
Yeah,
every time
and-
again.
Hopefully one of these days I'll actually get to meet you guys in person, whether I come over to Europe. I might be in Germany in September.
All right.
Yeah.
Let us know, and then we will meet somewhere.
For sure. Well, thank you guys once again, and I hope you have a great rest of your evening, and I hope to talk to you guys soon.
Yeah.
Same
Have a good
here.
day.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. See ya. Well, that's going to just about wrap up episode 25 of the podcast. Thank you so much once again to Hans and Melissa for joining on here. Fantastic people, man. I mean, this is one of the cool parts about doing this podcast is getting to know some of these band members that I actually like their music. When they turn out to be really cool people, it's just awesome all around. And I hope you guys enjoyed hearing about them as well. Good luck to them with everything coming up because, again, they just don't stop, man. They're always busy. They're always touring. Just as a reminder, that Dark Side of the Moon album, Metamorphosis, did drop on May 12th. It's fantastic. The new Feuerschwanz is coming out in July 7th. The album is called Fegefeuer. And the Ad Infinitum album, Chapter 3 Downfall, released back in March. Also a fantastic album. And if you are watching this on YouTube, I'll have links to all of their social medias and all of the places where you can check out this music and all of these albums and stuff like that. But that's going to be enough from me, man. Again, thank you so much to everybody that took the time to watch or listen wherever you're checking out this podcast. Wherever you are in the world, be safe, be kind to each other. I love all of you for taking the time to listen, and I will be back very soon with another episode of the Back Lounge podcast.